This video is packed to the absolute brim. Let's go ahead and get into it. Hopefully you've got your notebooks ready because I am just going to sound off 13 things that I have learned in making cold process soap that I will carry on into 2023. My suggestion here would be to watch this through once and then go back and take notes a second time around. This video is strictly about cold process soap. If you're interested in other bath and body products, I will have a video similar to this, but based on bath bombs, lotions, body butters, scrubs, those kinds of things. All of my tips about those specific products coming up. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. So tip number one, and these are in no particular order. Tip number one, your soaping temperature is going to make or break your bars. Here's what I mean. Through my initial research and things that I was finding early on, I've noticed that a lot of people were soaping between 115 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which turned out to be a terrible idea for me. I tried so hard. I would see the thermometer get to 115 degrees Fahrenheit and I would freak out thinking that I had passed, my chance. I missed my entire soaping window, and that could not be further from the truth. Since I've been soaping under 100 degrees, I've really found quite a bit more success. And actually, let me grab this bar and show it to you. So I soaped this bar at 95 degrees. And though it's not perfect, it's so much closer for what I have been going for. So I'm really, really proud of that. Take a look at this. And again, it's not perfect, but it's so much nicer than any bar that I've been able to make up to this point that I am truly I'm a little bit obsessed with it, okay? To be honest, it's definitely the nicest bar that I have been able to make thus far. And again, I soaked it at 95 degrees. Next up, I didn't know this when I started, so I ended up paying a lot for this, but you can find sodium hydroxide lye crystals at some local hardware stores. Luckily, the one in my town actually carries it. You do need to make sure that it is 100% sodium hydroxide lye. It is not cut with any other solution because it is a corrosive material. You can wind up paying a lot more for shipping. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but again, it's definitely worth peeking into finding these lye crystals at your local hardware store. Number three, when you are pouring your lye solution, actually, let me blend two of my tips together. Let me start with number three. You need to make sure that you are wearing the proper attire for soaping. You need gloves, long sleeves, the goggles, the mask, pull your hair back, do all the things, cover your toes, socks, slippers, shoes, whatever it is that you're wearing. You want to make sure that you don't have exposed skin, because if you were to splash any of the soap mix, whether it be just the hydroxide lye water solution or the soap batter, once you've already combined it with the oils, it can really be damaging to your skin. So you want to make sure you're soaping in a well-ventilated area without kids and pets and covered properly. Now that we've got that tip out of the way, the other thing you need to make sure that you are doing is first measuring your distilled water, then separately measuring your lye crystals, and then pouring your lye crystals onto your water. You should never pour water into lye crystals, okay? Those crystals need to be floating on top and then mixed into the water. The next thing that I found to be very interesting is you can actually freeze cubes of distilled water, or if you're using essential waters, like I've been using rose essential water and I really have enjoyed it, you can freeze those into like an ice cube tray or silicone mold, whatever you have, and that can actually get you soaping faster. So again, that would be personal preference, but I think that that's a really cool idea, especially if you're trying to kind of speed up the process a little bit. The only note that I have there is to make sure that you're freezing your distilled water or whatever liquid you're mixing with your lye solution. You freeze it in smaller cubes or smaller shaped things That way it's easier to measure out when you're ready to sew. Now, this one is actually a really great tip, especially if you are a beginner and you find yourself struggling, as I did in this video here. A great way to kind of overcome those first hurdles and making those first couple bars, and actually moving forward even if you want, if you're not ready to try out something new, is to use a quick mix. I don't know how many suppliers have quick mixes, but Brambleberry certainly does, and I've used them and really, really like them. This isn't sponsored in any way, but I absolutely love the Brambleberry quick mixes. I would highly recommend that if you're apprehensive about making those bars, or if you've made some and they have failed. Now, this next tip is a special one to me because I have a tutorial proving why this exact tip is a necessity. The tutorial's not up yet, but subscribe to my channel because in the next couple of weeks, I will have a tutorial on a failed a failed brick of cold processed soap. I tried to make a very nice, very well thought out and planned coconut bar, and I was a little bit nervous about how it was going to turn out. So instead of using a stick blender, I mixed it with just like a spatula, and you'll see why this is a terrible idea in that video actually. But always make sure that you are mixing with a stick blender or something that is faster than your hand. I actually saw this tip from a subscriber of mine. She left it down in the comments, and she actually mixes hers inside of a blender. That way it's contained, it's sealed, it doubles as a pouring pitcher. It was just such a great idea, and I was so glad to read that because I never in a million years would have thought of that myself. Anyway, don't just mix with a regular whisk or a spatula. You need to actually mix it with a stick blender or in a blender. This one has tripped me up so many times, so I'm glad that I finally figured out exactly what the problem is. When you are making your cold processed soap, I highly recommend you add your fragrance oil in last. Do absolutely everything. Make sure everything else is ready to go. After mixing together your oil and lye, after combining everything together, put that fragrance oil in absolutely last, but make sure that you mix it thoroughly before pouring into your mold. Now, this one is a really interesting idea. I haven't actually tried it myself because I don't have any molds for it, but I know a lot of people like to put embeds or those little cute little cutouts into their soap bars, and I think that that's absolutely adorable. But the tip that I've seen regarding these embeds is to actually make them from melt and pour soap and add them to the batter afterward. Apparently, it's just a super easy way to get an embed in there without having to go through the whole process of making a cold process soap bar embed, if that makes sense. It sounded good in my head, so hopefully it makes sense to you guys too. Tip number 10 is back on fragrance oil, and that is to read up on your fragrance oil before you purchase it and before you use it. Not all fragrance oils are made the same. The thing that you really need to know about your fragrance oils is how they react in cold processed soap. You need to check on the supplier website. Some of them have it on the actual bottle. Just check, see, make sure you're adding the right amount that is safe for skin, and see how it's going to react in the cold process. So it can cause all kinds of problems with the soap as you're making it. It can even discolor the bar that you're making. So again, read up on that fragrance, look at the reviews on different supplier websites. I always recommend looking at the reviews. They're so telling, and them people are brutally honest when leaving reviews. Now, when it comes to demolding your soap, it can be really hard. Because I know when I feel successful about a bar or a brick that I've made, or if I'm really nervous about how it's going to turn out, I just really, really, really want to take it out of the mold immediately and kind of see where we're at, right? Get a feel for where we're at. But that is actually a terrible idea if your bar is still soft. If you feel your brick and it is soft in any spot, leave it in the mold and check on it the next day. It's so much easier said than done, and I've done this to myself many times, but you really do need to leave it in the mold and make sure that it's fully solidified before you take it out, as much as that stinks, I know. Tip number 12, when you are soaping, okay, and you want to make 2 color bars, if you plan on making one of the sections or one of the swirls or something like that white, like the color white, then you need to add titanium dioxide to it. If you're using melt and pour, they do have color blocks, but again, we're just strictly on cold process soap here, so you need to make sure you add titanium dioxide. Not to bring back this beautiful bar again, but I achieved this white color by using titanium dioxide in the batter. If you don't add any titanium dioxide, then your bar will stay that like natural creamish color. Okay, white mica powder will not do the trick here. You have to use titanium dioxide. And again, I cannot stress enough how you need to let that titanium dioxide disperse in an oil before you mix it into the batter. If you don't, you're just gonna get clumpy, lumpy, and it's gonna look dusty. So you want to set aside about a tablespoon of your oils for whichever section. And this goes along with any kind of colorant that you're going to use in soap, not strictly titanium dioxide. For each color, set aside a tablespoon of that oil without the lye in it, but just the plain like oils that you're gonna mix in. So you set it aside and then you mix your colorant, whatever it is, into that little separate cup of oil. That way it will disperse the mica and you'll get like an even distribution of, look at me, an even distribution of the mica powder or titanium dioxide through your bars. Now, arguably, I saved the lamest tip, or not lamest, it's not lame, but I saved the easiest one to figure out for last. And number 13, my final tip for this video is that the only thing stopping you from being successful in your cold process soap journey is you. I know, please don't click off the video yet. Let me say my goodbyes first. What I have come to realize is the same thing that I've been telling my kids like their entire life, not only my personal children, but my children at school. If you didn't know, I am an elementary school science teacher. So this thing that I need to follow is the thing that I've been telling them like their entire lives. And that is the only thing that's going to make you better is to continue to try and practice and perfect what you're already working on. You need to figure out what the problem was the first time, when it went wrong, and make it better for next time. Any one of my students or my personal children will tell you that I say that probably 10 times a day, but it's true. It really, really is. I've struggled so much in this cold process soap journey and I couldn't figure out why until I sat down and really looked at what was going wrong. That's how I figured out the fragrance oil affects the bar. That's how I figured out the temperature you soap at affects the bar. All of these little things, if you really sit down and take a look at where your process went wrong, you can figure out how to fix it and what the problem was, right? That way you don't have to go through it again. That was a doozy, my friends. That was a doozy. If you're still here, first of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You'll have to let me know what you thought of these tips down in the comments below. Did you hear something familiar to you, or did you hear something new? Did you have an aha moment? That's what I'm looking for down in the comments. I need to know. I'm assuming that all of you watching this are beginners because I'm gonna guess a more advanced cold process soap maker would have heard the first 2 tips and clicked off of the video. So if you're still here, you must be new. Let me know what you're struggling with down in the comments below. I'd really, really love to help you guys out.